Welcome to another episode of the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, joined as always by Mike Warner. Mike, how you doing?
I don't know if it's as always, but I'm here. And so is my kid.
Yes. How you doing, Wyatt? Good to see you. Joining us as well is Michael Govier from the Enrico Palazzo Fantasy Podcast. Michael, how you doing, brother?
I am doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I've been looking forward to being on this show. I think we've done podcasts together, but this is my first time on the Friends with Fantasy Benefits podcast.
Yes, it is. And we're glad to have you. You're one of my favorite people in the industry. We were just talking about how we met almost like a year ago. And now we've become good friends and been on each other's podcasts. And so I felt like it was time. It was time to have Michael here. Oh, great. I didn't even think about it. We've got Mike and we've got Michael, which means the return of good Mike, as in Michael Govier, there, and evil Mike. There we go. So this is how we distinguish.
We have on the show.
Yeah, this is how we distinguish when we have two people named Mike on the same podcast. It's one of my favorite things. So Michael Govier, good Mike. Let everybody know where you can reach on social media and talk about what you do.
Well, I am the host of it's Enrico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Yes, it's a mouthful. You can keep it simple. Palazzo Pod. 2 L's, 2 Z's on Twitter. Palazzo Pod on Twitter and on Facebook. And we live stream every show, so you can go to the YouTube page. That's in our Twitter bio. Click on that link to go find that. And we are part of the Road to Fanatic Podcast Network, which is a website that I co-own and run with a couple other luminaries in the business. So check out roadtofanatic.com. Check out our podcast. Hey, it's Enrico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball. We've had on great guests, including Justin Mason, and we continue to talk about preseason hype, spring training. We'll be doing the shows all year long. We have a lot of fun, but we also try to make it informative. So we would love to give you guys 10 minutes of our time. Give us 10 minutes, and we'll give you the world.
Not only is it a lot of fun, not only is it very informative, it's got great music. I just got to say. It's like some of the best music in the industry. I absolutely love
Thank you.
All the songs that you put together. We've talked about this before.
Sure. I've collaborated with your wife on the theme song for her show this year. So yes, I love doing the music.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Evil Mike, remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug anything you got going on.
At Mike Warner, FWFB. I'm obviously on the Friends with Fantasy Benefits podcast. And I did just post a Facts Flutes column on kind of some rebound candidates that for the first time ever since I've been writing for Baseball HQ was free. So I actually threw it out there to like many people that aren't subscribed to Baseball HQ is outside of the paywall for one. So if if you're not a subscriber, you can check it out. It's talk about Joey Gallo and Frankie Montas and Evan White, one of my favorite guys. But yeah, that was pretty fun this last week to actually be able to like have people that haven't read anything, like family members, be able to actually read it.
I read your stuff, by the way. I do.
Oh, thank you.
I have not read this week's article yet because I'm a little afraid of you hating on my boy Frankie Montas. But
Spoiler alert, I actually am positive on all the guys in the article. So
there we go. That's what I like to hear. So, all right, and then you can always reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. I'm writing and podcasting in a bunch of places. So follow me on Twitter. You'll find them. I'm not even going to go through the whole list. I'll do that later. So
not hard to miss, Justin Mason.
Keep it at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk some news and notes first, and then we're going to cover some guys that are interesting hitters without starting roles. So guys that are likely bench options on their own team, but maybe fantasy viable for your team. So let's start off with Michael Franco. He is he is close to signing. I don't know if it's official yet, but I know it was pretty close. A deal with Baltimore to become their third baseman. I kind of love this move for him, his fantasy value, because at least now he has a team place to play, not a bad place to hit. So good, Mike. What are your thoughts on Michael Franco going to Baltimore?
Well, when I saw this on the rundown, I was like, why? Who cares? But that was just me being dismissive of Michael Franco. It's disrespectful and it's rude, and I apologize to Mr. Franco for that, because if he is going to play, he's going to get run at Camden Yards in the hot heat of summer. I lived in Baltimore for 2 years, and I went to a lot of games there, and you don't have to live there to know this. August, July, great times to be hitting home runs. And this is a guy, that's what he does. He'll hit 200, You know, he doesn't walk for Jack Squad. That's another problem. I don't like his profile. I never have. He's definitely like post. He's not even post hype. It's just over. Like, he's just a guy now. He's just out there. I'm not a big fan, but if he gets playing time, it's something I'll consider in, it doesn't even matter if it's Roto or OBP or any league. He just hits home runs and does nothing else.
All right, Evil Mike, what are your thoughts on Franco going to Baltimore?
Probably viable in 15-team leagues as a corner, maybe not always starting for you. For what it's worth, in Baltimore last year, he would have, if he was playing in Baltimore, he would have hit 14 home runs where, he hit 6 in Kansas City. So, I mean, it actually does add a pretty significant amount of potential home runs to his 2021 outlook, I would say. 260 to 270 batting average, 80+% zone contact profile over the last 6 years of his career. So genuinely a really strong contact rate throughout his career. Not a great walk rate like Mike talked about, but I do think we're going to see probably between 20 25 home runs. He's going to split time possibly with Rio Ruiz. I don't know, but I still think he's probably in line for at least 500 to 600 plate appearances, barring health, with a lineup that isn't that bad. Like, he could potentially score 70-ish runs as well. I mean, I know his career high is 66, but he could potentially, come close to that if he does play the entire season. Like I said, Camden Yards, and like Mike said as well, is a really amazing place to hit. It would have been tied for the lead for any ballpark and at the MLB last year if he were to be hitting there for the home run total for him. So not a 30 home run threat, but 20 to 25 with some good counting stats. 260, 270 average. That's 15 team league play.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I don't think there's much more needs to be added. I love the landing spot in Camden Yards, not to mention all those AL East stadiums are pretty good places to hit. Not a lot of great pitching in that division either. So I think it's going to be nice for him, and he'll probably get flipped at the deadline and lose a lot of value. So hopefully you're drafting him in a league where you can drop him when he's no longer useful if he gets traded someplace as a bench bat. But I like the landing spot for him. So Steven Strasberg injures his calf while pitching. This is a reoccurring thing with him, not necessarily a calf injury, but just getting injured. He's coming off of carpal tunnel surgery in the offseason. He's had back and elbow issues before. How scared of Steven Strasberg should we be this year, Evil Mike?
Well, I started to push him up. You and I have talked about him a fair amount this offseason. I feel like we bring him up all the time. I started to push him up in my starting pitcher ranks, and lo and behold, he has looked great this spring overall. Like, velocity looks great. His mechanics look great. He doesn't really seem to be bothered by the carpal tunnel stuff. Now, as far as like his injury track record, he's been injured every year except for 2019, which somehow, some way he was able to, go up to 200 some innings, which was amazing. I'm probably on a scale of, 0 to 100. I'm probably like 60% worried, just because it's already not even, game one of the season yet. And we're already dealing with some issues, but for what it's worth, you said he's a fast healer. So he might be back like lickety splickety, but like, honestly, I'm hoping fingers crossed, especially based on his ADP, that we can get 20 to 25 starts out of him. That might be a fool's errand. We'll see. But based on, where he's going in drafts, like you kind of have no choice, especially if you're somebody like me right now who took him as my starting pitcher 2 in TGFBI. He was going, since February 1st, he's gone at pick 70. Like, that's about starting pitcher 2, starting pitcher 3 territory. I kind of bumped him up to starting pitcher 2, and now I'm kind of, worried about it. But ultimately, if you've already drafted him, you kind of have to hope for the best. If you haven't drafted yet, then I would drop him down back to where I originally had him, which I think was in the 27 to 30 range as starting pitcher.
Yeah, he's currently going, starting pitcher number 21 on NFBC and Draft Champions League over the last month, around pick 67. And it's just too high for me. There's too many injuries with this guy. I'm just not gonna pay the price. And I know the talent's there. If he's on the field or on the mound for the entire season, he's gonna be a stud, but he just rarely is. Govier, what are you doing with Strasberg this year?
I think you guys are being harsh. You guys are being uncool in my bra. The Strasberg, man, he's sweet. But yes, he's always injured. Who could lie? My nose would start growing like Pinocchio if I tried to sell you a bag of goods on this. There's just no proof. Rarely that we could ever see this guy be healthy, and it sucks because I really love his talent. His pitch mix, everything he offers, it's phenomenal. Justin, you already covered it. Mike said it very well. Like, if it's not one thing, it's another. But I was pro Strasberg on no carpal tunnel issues, and I think that's being put to bed. So I feel good about that. I wasn't worried about the carpal tunnel, but what I might have forgotten about when I took Strasberg in at least 3 leagues so far. I've drafted about 12 times. I've taken him, but I've taken him in the 80s. So I'm willing to take him as like my number 2 guy. I really am. And I know that is injury risk. So I might sound like I'm doing double speak here. I admit that freely, but I kind of like him still, but I am not going to be fooling myself. This will not be a fool's errand. I'm aware of the risks that go with him. So be that as it may, he's got a long-ass contract that he needs to fulfill, and the Nationals want him to fulfill that. So they're going to give him all the opportunities to play as much as he can. So I think 150 innings pitched are very possible this year. I do. I actually think that.
I mean, if he's healthy, I think the Nationals may try to go all in this year, considering it's the last year of Steven Strasberg, or sorry, not Strasberg, just last year Scherzer's contract with them. They may try to make a real go at this.
They still have Corbin, too. They've won with Corbin, Strasberg, and Scherzer as main pieces.
Yeah.
If that
and Corbin's the worst of those. I don't want Corbin at all.
Oh, I want Corbin.
His velocity's up. I'm kind of back in.
I'm back in. I never left. I left. I
left. No, I was long gone. Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. TJ Antone tweaks his groin, and that is a funny thing to say. But it looks like he may not be ready for opening day. He may be ready for opening day. They're down Wade Miley right now. There's a spot in this rotation, and Lorenzen has, been up and down, gave up 2 homers today to Shohei Ohtani. So I think there is a real shot for Antone to get into this Reds rotation if he's healthy. What are you doing, Govier, with TJ Antone?
This is the guy that gets buzzed a lot. There's a lot of buzz around TJ Antone because he had a nice little run of 35 innings. Is that why? I mean, he still had 4 walks per 9 in his small sample size last year. He struck out a lot of guys. 11.4 K9 is nice. That looks good on paper with a 2.80 ERA, but the FIP was 3.64, and I just don't understand why we're that excited about him yet. I need to see a lot more. The minor league profile shows less Ks. It shows him getting some outs and being somewhat reliable, but also a home run to fly ball rate that I'm a little suspect of in his larger sample size. So for me, Lorenzen's not that great either. He needs to be a reliever. I don't like Antone either. I think it's kind of a mess. I am off Antone. I don't have him in any drafts anywhere. I would take him way late because his ADP's not that hardcore, so you're not risking a lot, but I'm not interested.
Mike, are you interested?
I'm hella interested. I'm a big Antone guy. He's going out. He's essentially free. He's going outside the top 350, and a lot of people don't think he's going to get innings, but I truly, like in my base projections right now, I have him at 120, and I realize we're talking about the injury issue here to his groin, so who knows where that could go. But so far things are optimistic. People think that he's going to be back on the mound. If not his next scheduled start in Cactus League play, maybe the start after. So I don't think that the opening day is in jeopardy for him. I definitely think he has a rotation spot to start the year. I'm a village idiot. Like, and I see Michael Lorenzen is kind of garbage on the mound as a starting pitcher. Like, the Reds have to notice this, and unless they're, and even with Lorenzen, if they were to put him in, I still think that Antone finds his way to at least 15 to 18 starts, maybe a little bit more. I'm hoping that we get 120 innings, and while Mike, you bring up some good concerns about his minor league track record and stuff. I loved what I saw last year, and yes, it is a very short sample, but he has at least 1 strikeout pitch, the slider. He does have some command issues, and I 100% agree with that, but he keeps the ball on the ground. His expected ERA was great in a short sample. His velocity is great. Even if things do kind of fall by the wayside from a walk percentage perspective, which I don't think they will, but even if they do, he could be a prime, high leverage guy for them, who could kind of stumble into some saves, possibly, depending on Sean Doolittle, Lucas Sims, and all that stuff. But I still am looking at him as a probably 75% of the time starter this year. Again, barring health and all that, but I love his pitch mix. I love his velocity. I love that he keeps the ball on the ground. And, 27 years old, he's not like some prospect coming up and, becoming like a star out of nowhere. But I do think he could provide like a 3.5 to 3.70 ERA, high strikeout numbers, probably some whip issues with like, again, 120 innings pitch. I think at 350 to 380, like that's nothing but profit.
I mean, here's the thing for me. Like, I don't know why I wasn't on Antone earlier in draft season, because this is so eerily similar to what Tyler Mahle went through last year, right? Mm-hmm. He's on the outside, of the rotation. He's going to be a long reliever. Like, and I was in on Mahle because it's like, listen, I love the skills. He might get cheap wins if he's the long reliever. And if there's an injury, makes his way into the rotation. What happens? Injury, makes his way into the rotation, has a fantastic year. And so I kind of see the same path for Antone. And so, I haven't gotten him in any drafts, and I've done 70 million drafts already. I'm definitely looking at him for my upcoming drafts as a guy to target, because I think he could have kind of that same path into the rotation that Tyler Mahle did last year and had a lot of success. The only concerning thing to me is the news today that Eugenio Suarez may play shortstop in Cincinnati, which seems like a nightmare. Like,
who the hell said that?
He did. Yeah,
the manager. He's going to start at shortstop tomorrow, and they're going to move Moustakas over to third and possibly play either Jonathan India or D. Gordon at second. So,
wow. I'm a Tigers fan. Yeah, I'm a Tigers fan who we had Suarez. It was the worst trade of all time. We traded him for Simon, I think it was, Alfredo Simon. It was awful. Mm-hmm. It was a horrendous trade in hindsight. But he was not a very good shortstop then. I don't know why he would be better now, because he's just become more of a power-hitting corner infield. That's who he is.
I think that the Reds feel better about having D. Gordon out there at second base than they do about Jose Garcia at short. That's what I think.
Yeah, but why not just put D. Gordon at short?
Very good point. Maybe they think he's spent there. His arm has never really been great, and maybe they think that he's at a point now where his arm really isn't there. And Suarez does have a good arm. He doesn't have the range, but he does have a good arm.
It just they've got so many ground ball pitchers in Cincinnati, that. I'm dropping Luis Castillo down my ranks now. You
just got your filthy mouth.
Got it. He 60% ground ball rate, and he's got Eugenio Suarez.
It's gonna go right to Moustakas. Moustakas every time.
They've got they got a statue playing shortstop. It's just I don't understand what they're doing. So
let me say one thing about Antone real quick. The rotation will end up being a 6-person rotation, because it's my thought that all of these rotations eventually will go 6-man, because that's how it's playing out. So even if he doesn't get the initial opportunity, I really want to say I'm pro what Warner said about 120 innings pitched. I think that's very, very much doable, even if I'm not a big Antone fan.
All right. Speaking of Cincinnati, Sonny Gray is dealing with a back issue right now. He was scratched. This is kind of the concern about Sonny Gray, right? Weird mechanics, kind of injuries that could pop up. Are you worried, Govier, about Sonny Gray?
I am not that concerned. I'll be cautious, of course. You take note of this, but like we were talking about before the show, 2 weeks ago we were doing a stream about Bogarts and the MRI on his shoulder, and everybody's freaking out that day. And now it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. I think everyone's drafting Xander Bogarts as they should have been generally. I'm not saying this is the same thing. Pitchers can be more delicate, so I understand that. I'm cautious. I also don't have any shares of Sonny Gray anywhere. I am a little dubious about what he could provide us this year from a fantasy perspective. I don't love the ballpark. I never have, and I know that he could be a ground ball pitcher. He can get more outs, and he has been borderline Cy Young worthy a couple of years ago. So it's possible. I just don't like what's going on in Cincinnati. I feel like they're kind of confused about what their direction is. And I know that's not like deep data-driven research, but if you're asking me my opinion, I'm just kind of not really worried about this injury, and I'm more in general kind of avoiding Gray overall.
What about you, Mike? Are you avoiding Gray? It's not that I'm avoiding him. I just haven't ended up with him anywhere.
That's a better way to put it. It is.
Yeah, and really, I'm not even that concerned about the injuries. He's been a guy that, even in his, he's had multiple stints where he missed a couple months in 2016, missed about a month in 2017, then he missed some time last year with a back issue, which probably, if anything, has me the most concerned is that he still is having some more back issues. And as we saw with Kershaw, who was substantially older, but Sonny Gray's 31, or going into his age 31 season. Like, it's at least worth, pointing out there. But ultimately, I'm not that worried. It's just that, based on where he's going in drafts, it's not really where I'm comfortable taking him. Like, he's going, about in the Steven Strasberg range. And do you really want to count on Gray as a starting pitcher 2-3 for you? If anything, like, I think Strasberg has a little bit more upside in terms of, possible ERA and strikeout rate, potential. But overall, I'm not. If you're a Gray guy, I'm not really worried right now. I will say that the fact that he is still continuously having a back issue probably should drop him down your ranks. I'm assuming that he's probably around the starting pitcher 24, 25 range. He probably needs to go down to like starting pitcher 35 ish if you're gonna definitely take into account the back injury. I'm trying to look up where he finished last year because I do think he's gonna end up replicating a lot of what he did. He probably was like close to a top 50 guy, top 55. Oh, he was 49. So I think just skills wise, he's probably going to end up being another, top 50-ish starter, but then you drop him, 5 to 10 spots because of injury. I'm going to stop rambling, but yeah, I'm not really that worried, but I'm not a Gray guy.
Yeah, I'm not a Gray guy either, and it's largely because I hate his mechanics, and I'm just worried over time that he was going to have these injuries. Reminds me so much of kind of the funky mechanics that Tim Lincecum had, and we saw what happened to Lincecum's body over time, and so I've just always been worried.
Are you a Chris Sale guy? Were you saying that when he was a reliever with the White Sox?
I was not saying that with him.
Because everybody every year was saying, Chris Sale, his mechanics suck. He's got to get injured. And then 9 years later, he gets injured.
No, I was not one of those people. I think that it was more about with Sale, though, it was like his slight frame. Like, people were like, he doesn't have enough weight. And dude
Tristan
was an
McKenzie.
pitcher. Yeah, we're saying, but Tristan McKenzie's had long injury history issues throughout.
McKenzie is like a feather. He is a feather. Like, Sale makes him look like nothing.
He's built like Paul Sport. He's
the Forrest Gump feather.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not that I dislike Gray necessarily. I just like other guys more, and I'm just not going to pay the price on it. So,
right.
All right. Let's move on to our next topic. That is Austin Nola breaks his finger. Probably going to miss like 6 weeks or something like that. Huge bummer for me because I drafted him in the Barf League this weekend, and then the next day he breaks his finger. So that was kind of a huge bummer. Thankfully, that's only a one catcher league, so and has IL spots, so I can throw him in the IL. But a little bit of bummer. Do we care about who else is going to catch in San Diego there, Warner?
Yeah, I was actually talking to Mike about that prior to the show starting. I'm like, do we care? I do. So the more I look into Victor Caratini, I think that he would be somewhat of I don't think he's going to be a batting average like stabilizer for you, but I don't think he's going to kill you from a catching perspective when it comes to batting average. There's probably still a little bit of pop in there. Like, he doesn't have anything that's above league average when it comes to, his, power profile or anything like that. But I do think he's serviceable in the short term. More than likely for like 2-catcher NL only formats. I don't know if he really sneaks himself into mixed league territory at all. Even 15 or 20 teamers, I think it's like really kind of cutting it close. But Camposano could potentially sneak some time. But I think that the Padres, based on what I'm seeing, are going to probably go with Caratini a fair amount here, just because he has a little bit of big league experience. I think that he's probably going to be the guy. When it comes to Nola, like I'm assuming I didn't really end up with a lot of Nola so far in draft season anyways. He's thus far since February 1st been like a 170-ish pick. I think that he's probably going to drop down to like 250 now after this, like him or Carson Kelly, right? Like, I probably would go Carson Kelly just based on a full year. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe either way, I think you have to drop him at least like 3 or 4 rounds based on this news. And, overall, I don't think that you're going to grab Caratini and feel really good about your situation. So overall, no, I don't think you really should care about the backups. But if I had to pick one, it'd be Caratini to, hopefully fill a couple weeks in batting average.
All right, Govier, would you care at all?
Well, I think Mike summed up a lot of it quite well. There's not a lot to add there. I want to say shout out here, though. BK Rajman 33. He was just on the pod I was doing, so I feel like I'm spending the whole evening with you, Brian. Good to see you. And shout out to Mark Kiefer. He's in the comments section, living it up. Love all those guys. And I wonder if they love Austin Nola because he's kind of a flash in the pan, but he's 31 years old. We were talking about this before the show. He's old. He's not some phenom, some up-and-coming prospect. He's had his time. And if he's older and he's breaking fingers and there's a lineup that is very powerful like San Diego's, you got a guy like Caratini and Capusano waiting in the wings, there's other opportunities. I know that they traded a bunch of players in that huge deal last year with Seattle. All kinds of players came and went. Taylor Trammell went to Seattle, yada, yada, yada. I would probably drop him down to about that range that Mike said. I think I would still rather have all the catchers that are around him or below him now, such as Gary Sanchez all day, clearly. And Dalton Varsho, that's actually an interesting comp. Would I rather have Dalton Varsho or Austin Nola? Because both of them have uncertainties. I would put it back to you guys. Would you guys have a preference on that?
Varsho's been awful, from what I've seen. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm worried that they're going to try to send him down to learn how to catch, which I think is a huge mistake because I don't think he's a catcher long term. I'm
going Nola, I think, because I think Varsho potentially doesn't come up for a couple months, and maybe Nola's back before that.
Couple months? Yeah. Okay, I thought maybe a month. Possibly. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could go down for a couple months, and they try to get that year of service time back. So yeah, I'm a little worried on Varsho. I mean, I like his bat. Like, I think he's gonna be a good hitter at the major league level, and if he can retain catcher eligibility, that'll be great for fantasy. But I don't know that he's gonna retain catcher eligibility long term. Probably for next year he will have it, but I think after that it probably ends. So like, I don't know. Right now, like if I had Varsho in a league, I'd be trying to trade him in a dynasty league right now because I don't think his value is gonna go up anytime soon. All right, we'll finish out the news with Brennan Rodgers, former top prospect of the Rockies, who has had injury problems and just success problems in the minor leagues as a top prospect. Looked like he was on track to be kind of the everyday second baseman in Colorado. People were just starting to be like, oh, I think this is a sleeper. Oh, now is the time. He goes, I think he was trying to steal a base into second and pulls up lame, injures his knee. Govier, what are your thoughts on Brennan Rodgers? Do we even care now? And who kind of gains the most in Colorado with him being out?
I was, for about a week or so, maybe 10 days, I was feeling like I missed the boat. I was like, oh, damn it, Brendan Rodgers is really starting to make progress here, and he's finally going to cash in because there's going to be playing time because they got rid of Arenado, and they've opened up opportunities with Daniel Murphy retiring and no Ian Desmond. So I was like, woohoo! I was feeling regret because I hadn't drafted him yet. Yeah. But now, I don't feel any of that regret at all. I feel very confident in all of my Garrett Hampson shares, which I have a lot of. I know Sam Hilliard could push him for playing time, and there's Ramel Tapia. There's a lot of guys in play there, but I think Hampson was a safer play from the long run. He might not be as elite in terms of 30 home run prowess and all that stuff, but I feel very, very grateful today that I have no Brendan Rodgers shares. And I think anybody who was thinking, hey, this is the guy. I know it's not a major injury. It's not like it's a season-ending injury, but it's just another example of his inability to stay on the field. And at a certain point, just like a Giancarlo Stanton or all the players that become known for the injury-prone tag, that's going to be sticking with him, and it's going to be in the back of the heads of the Rockies, who are buffoons to begin with. So if you throw in a buffoon organization with a guy that they're not really clear on, I think that's a cloudy, murky nightmare, and I would just avoid Rodgers at all costs, and I'd be happy with any other piece of the Rockies that I do have.
What about you, Mike?
So some people are calling this the 2021 season. I'm calling it CJ Cron, Sam Hilliard, and Garrett Hampson season. That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah, there you go.
So Rodgers, it's not definitive that he's going to miss the beginning of the season yet. They're pretty optimistic, kind of similar to Antone. They're kind of optimistic about his outlook and that they don't think it's a very severe strain. Albeit he's always been somebody that's been injury plagued. I do think, though, that if he is somewhat healthy, they're going to give him. I mean, he was a first round pick for them. He's somebody that has, really for a couple of years, more so, in 2018 area, 2017 was like a high rated prospect for them. I think they're going to try and give him as much run as they possibly can if he can be healthy on the field. That's a big if. And, I think right now, I haven't penciled in for 420 plate appearances. That's obviously a rough guess. Obviously, I mean, I have no idea what he's going to be able to post, but I love Hampson's speed. I think at some point, even if he plays part-time, he's going to be a 20 stolen base threat. I think if he plays full time, you're looking at like 30 plus stolen bases if he can make contact as well. But CJ Cron is like one of the most criminally underrated guys in drafts right now. I mean, in Coors Field, he should be able to knock like 30 easy. You could potentially see 40 depending on how things go. And then Sam Hilliard is also another one, like power speed combo to go 2020. Very economical in drafts. I mean, if Rodgers is out, it kind of helps all of these guys. I mean, Cron's role is good no matter what, but Hampson specifically and also Hilliard in a way, their roles are way more cemented if Rodgers is out, because then everything shifts over and they both get more full-time at bats and plate appearances and everything. So it's not that I want Rodgers to get injured. I just kind of want him out of the way for a little while. So that way we can, that way we can see it. Honestly, the DH would be a great thing as well, but we really can't count that at this point. I honestly thought we would have it at this point as well. So ultimately, I wouldn't bank on Rodgers being out yet, but I still think that those three Rockies are probably three of the best values in drafts out of any draft that you play in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a Garrett Hampson guy, so I'm going to go back to the well. He's been leading off quite a bit during spring training as well.
That's Tapia, though.
But even when Tapia is leading off, Garrett Hampson's still in the lineup, which is a really good sign. So I think Garrett Hampson is the full-time player. I think if Rodgers is playing, then Hilliard is probably a platoon guy with Tapia. But hopefully, if Rodgers is hurt, Garrett Hampson moves to second, and they have, Hilliard full-time. I drafted Hilliard really late in TGFBI, like I think round 26 or something like that. And I've never been a Sam Hilliard guy, but I know there's power. I know there's speed. I don't know how much contact he's going to make, but if he gets full-time playing time in Colorado, that's going to be pretty sexy. So I'll take it.
Full times, 2020 could happen. Yeah, you're right. Full time only.
Let's talk about some interesting hitters without starting roles. John Bertie was someone I was kind of excited about because I thought they were going to give him a shot to play second every day. Doesn't appear he's going to be their opening day second baseman. He's going to kind of go back to being that kind of super utility guy, but he has got speed that can be very, very impactful in fantasy. So Warner, what are your thoughts on John Bertie for the 2021 season?
Bertie's a great draft value, and I think I want the narrative to be that he's not going to get that much playing time because of the starting, second base job not probably going to him because he's just flat out better than Diaz and Chisholm right now. And I mean, he's going to end up getting probably a super utility role, which is fine. He still had, 9 stolen bases in 2020 and like 120 at bats. And in 2019, he had 17 stolen bases and 256 at bats. Like his speed score is 97th percentile. Marlins are okay with him running. He's not the worst defensively. He's able to get on base at a fairly decent clip. He does have some contact issues, but overall, like I'm really excited about John Bertie, where he's going. Like just inside the top 300, somebody that I think is an automatic 20 stolen base guy, probably closer to 30. And that's even if he only has like 400 to 450 plate appearances. And that's also relying on Isan Diaz, who I've loved as a prospect, but just flat out has not been able to hit the fucking ball since he's been in the big leagues. And then he had a whole year off for COVID last year, which I understand, but he really hasn't been in live game action now. I mean, he's had a few games in spring training, but Diaz has a long way to go before we can feel somewhat confident that he can, have 70% of the playing time at second base. And Chisholm isn't ready. If you watched him at all in spring, he's just, he's hit 1 home run or 2, and he's just been all over the place when it comes to contact as well. So Bertie is the guy. And I don't know why. I actually really want the narrative to continue that he's not going to be getting the full-time job because I honestly don't think it matters.
Govier, doesn't matter to you.
I don't think it matters to me a great deal. Some people I really respect have been pushing Jazz Chisholm a lot recently, saying he could still win a roster spot. He could be an impact player.
Good.
And that seems like a reach, a big reach at this point right now. I think I pretty much agree with everything Mike said there. Bertie's a guy that I've mulled over at least 3 or 4 times in my draft, saying this is a guy who's multi-positional eligibility. It was great. I want that. I want to have as much of those kind of guys like a Garrett Hampson I can have. And I don't really have any negatives to say because I'm not going to really take him at a point that would really cost me a lot. So I think Bertie's fine. If he stays where he's at with his ADP being, like 250 260 beyond that, if he stays there, then take a chance on him. And I don't think it's that big of a loss if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think it's just a worthy gamble where he's going. I mean, like Mike said, or Govier just said, second base and outfield eligibility is huge. I love those guys who can play infield and outfield on your team. He may not play every day, but he hasn't needed to play every day to rack up just a ton of stolen bases. And that's always what people are looking for late in a draft, right? They're always feeling like, oh, I got some speed early, but now I really need to lock in my speed late. And there are a few guys like John Bertie late. I just like John Bertie because that multi-position eligibility, and as much as Miles Straw's down there, Manny Margot's down there, though I do like Margot a lot more than Bertie. Bertie seems to just continuously fall in drafts. And I think it's the kind of the unsureness of the role there, but he's had unsure roles the last 2 seasons and produced quite a fair amount of stolen bases in the process. So I don't see why that would be extremely different. And when you're getting him outside the top 200 plus picks, I think it's just worth a gamble right there. The next guy I want to talk about was Sam Hilliard, but we kind of already talked about him. Is there anything you guys want to add to it?
He's going to be like a 7th rounder next year.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know about that. I think he will. Well, I mean, I don't think he's
that's an insane fantasy take. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I like that bold prediction.
It's got stones.
Well, we'll just skip right over on to Ahmed Rosario, who Andres Jimenez has pretty much been named the opening day shortstop. It sounds like Rosario is going to play some outfield, play some infield, kind of be a backup to a lot of different positions and try to find playing time that way. We're not that far removed from him being a pretty impactful fantasy player and a top prospect in his own right. Govier, do you think Ahmed Rosario is a guy that you can draft and hope that he gets into some decent playing time and can hit enough homers and steal enough bases for you?
I took him in TGFBI, and now I'm wondering if I made a mistake because the role is now clearly undefined. Sure, injuries happen, and that could change the game. So I'm not worried about his talent. I do believe he's a fairly talented guy because we've seen it. He's done it in a large sample size. He might not be a 2020 guy, but I think a guy who can hit 270, give you 15 bombs, and steal 20 bags if he's given full-time opportunity to do so, I think that's very much who he can be. And I don't think it really matters where he plays. It doesn't seem like, I got to play shortstop, it's do or die. Although, maybe the jury's still out on that part of it. It's just a question of how Cleveland sees it. And Cleveland is some sleazy motherfuckers. They are out to make as much money and maximize profit and opportunity on every single player possible. They're not buffoons like the Rockies are. They're just really greedy and they're cheap. So I know Jimenez has been getting opportunities, and it's clear as day he seems to be the starting guy. I just wouldn't rule out the fact that he still goes down for at least the beginning of the season, and Rosario gets the opportunity to play regularly. And if he does, and he does well, will that change things? This is a scenario that is completely possible, but it's also made up. It's not a guarantee. So at this point, I really like Rosario as a deeper guy because of where he's at in drafts. He's going 335 ADP on NFBC right now. That's not much of a risk for a guy who could also bring you. In fact, the one thing I can guarantee you about this rant is that he will give you multi-positional eligibility because he's going to be playing elsewhere too.
All right, Warner, what are you doing with Ahmed Rosario?
I think he's going at a pretty decent cost. I mean, outside the top 330 is awesome. My biggest question mark with him is if he's going to start stealing bases again. I know he had a calf injury in the second half of last year, or in the only half of last year, and that probably suppressed some of his stolen base opportunities. The problem for me is that they've gone down every year, and he's with a new club, so we'll see what happens with the Indians. Like, it could be a scenario where maybe they do want to, have him run a little bit, but Cleveland is like mid-pack in stolen base attempts. At least they were last year. I don't really know if that's going to change much. So, Jimenez, I like a lot. I don't think he's going to go down. They've played him a lot this spring. He's had a really good spring. He's also had some stolen base attempts too. I just don't see that happening. And then Eddie Rosario is like an amazing draft bargain at my in my valuations as well. I think Rosario could present a lot of value if he is running again. He hasn't attempted to steal in spring, which has me still kind of guessing. If you are hoping for speed to come back for Rosario, then you legitimately are kind of just throwing out blind luck hoping for it. But there is speed there. He's somebody that in the past has been able to, really, register some high, sprint speed and also speed scores overall. He's also been fairly successful on the base pass, like a 70-ish% rate. So if he's able to get like, 400 or 500 plate appearances this year, and he is a defense first guy like that. I mean, Cleveland will probably want his glove out there. He could potentially steal, 14, 15 bases this year. The power's probably going to lend to like double digit pop, but still a big ground ball tilt on his bad ball profile and not a lot of pop there. But like, you could be seeing a season where it's like 10 home runs, 15 steals, 260 to 280 average. I mean, he has a wide range of outcomes because of his bad ball profile overall. But like, I think that we could have a pretty decent year, but I need to see the steals come. So like in short, I haven't ended up with him anywhere, but I do think that there's hope for him to kind of register more value going into next year for a lot of people. And he could be kind of a cheap speed source as well if he is, somebody that's going to start running again. It really just depends on his calf.
I think he's going to end up being a bargain in fantasy drafts this year because who is stopping him from playing? Jake Bauers. That's who's stopping him from playing. They could just move Josh Naylor to first base where Bauers is sitting, just rotting away, and then put Ahmed Rosario in the outfield where he would be a much better defender than Naylor,
right.
And they would improve that defense at first base with Naylor moving to first, and potentially get a pretty decent bat out there. I think that it'll work itself out one way or another. I drafted him in the Barf League this weekend, kind of as his bench bat. I do love the idea that he's going to get outfield eligibility, so he's going to be shortstop and outfield eligible early in the season. I mean, this is a guy who reworked his swing in the offseason and really tried to fix some of the mistakes he was making last year that kind of led to his struggles. I tend to believe that he's going to bounce back and that people have just kind of written him off because of a 60-game sample. It wasn't even 60 games for him. So I'm back on board on Ahmed Rosario, and I think people are sleeping on his potential because they don't see the path to playing time right now. All right. The next set of hitters we're going to talk about are two Padres because they're kind of both in similar situations because they're on the Padres, and that's Ha-Seong Kim and Jurickson Profar, both kind of on the outside looking in on this Padres lineup. So, Govier, what are your thoughts on these two guys? Either of them interest you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. How many times do I have to watch Ha-Seong Kim drop in drafts? Anybody who knows a thing or two about fantasy baseball seems to be dismissing him. He falls 100 picks easy from his current ADP. It happens every time. And at a certain point, it just becomes more valuable to take him because you'd be missing out on an opportunity for a guy who signed a deal. Now get this, he's not a minor leaguer, okay? This is a guy who's coming over from Asia. He's got experience. He's 25 years old. He signed a shorter deal, a prove-it deal. It's not a long-term deal. And this guy could have signed a lot of different places. He chose to sign in San Diego, yet people are drafting him like he won't play. Now, I know there's a lot of players involved, Profar being one of them. And Profar's another guy who's in this range that you're talking about, Justin, with Hampson and Kingery. There's a lot of these guys, second/outfield availability. And there are a bunch of them deeper in the draft, too. Just so happens to be that Profar is a guy who kind of proved himself last year and for some reason signed in San Diego. I don't know what he was thinking. He must have not have known about San Diego's plans when he signed because we've all been bitching about it ever since. Like, whoa, AJ Preller's ruining fantasy baseball for all of us because they're signing all these players and there's not enough positions to go around and there's no DH either. So what can we do with these guys? This is the mess. But what you end up getting with Kim in particular, I like Profar. I think he'll never be the super uber prospect he was supposed to be. Those days are over, but he's still a reliable hitter and a speedster. But I like Kim much, much more. They're going to play him. You think they're going to sit him over Cronenworth and Profar and these guys? That's not going to happen. He's second baseman. He's going to be second baseman, and he's going to play a lot because that's what he came over here to do is play. He wouldn't have signed at a place that would screw him. Someone's getting traded. Something's going to change here because before opening day, there's too many bats here. And I know injuries could happen, so Preller's trying to gear up so there's no dents in the armor of this team so they can go to the World Series. But someone's got to go. And I would love, every time it happens, I try to draft Ha-Seong Kim when he falls. Every time.
All right, Warner, what are you doing with these two guys?
I'm letting them fall. So Kim, admittedly, I don't know a lot about. Like, I've read some stuff on him, and like he seems encouraging. I took him in a dynasty draft, second or third overall. So like obviously, like I buy into some of the potential with him. I love Cronenworth though. I think Cronenworth is legit. I also think that their lineup is kind of set. Like, Kim will play maybe, but I've heard rumblings that possibly they could try and set him down and rework his deal a little bit. He's been kind of lost at the plate in spring. He has walked a few times, but in the times I've seen him, I know that not every, player coming from overseas is the same, but, Tutogo with the Rays, like he needed an entire year to catch up to major league pitching. And not everybody, again, is like that. But even Akiyama from Cincinnati, it took him a while before he really caught up to things. It could just take some time for Kim. And, that's not by any means me saying that I'm not, high on him long term, because I do think that, especially the second half of the year going into next season, that there could be potentially a lot of value there in multiple ways. But right now I'm just kind of out based on what I've seen. And, Profar, if he was to get a full season of at-bats, is more of like a 10 to 12 home run, probably 15 to 17 stolen base guy with some decent average and everything. But like he's a filler. I don't think he, even if he comes into full-time playing time, they have enough depth here where he wouldn't get the lion's share of playing time at any point. So, I mean, he's more of an NL only, deep NL only play for me. And kind of same with Kim right now. I think that Kim is the guy that offers a little bit more potential upside for mixed leagues if he were to get an opportunity, but it would have to come with some sort of injury. And we don't know what his major league skills are yet. There's just no real track record for us to look at. And that's not to say that we should get off every player that comes from, any other country in their first season. Because if you did that with like Jose Abreu, for instance, you were fucked. But if if you're buying into Kim, there's no reason not to, right? I mean, based on where he's going, like that's a very economical cost. If he ends up doing pretty well this year, then bravo and, kudos. I honestly don't think that there's any reason not to take him where he's going. I'm the type that's going to kind of wait and see on him just because of what I've seen so far in spring and because I just don't have a lot of real knowledge on him. But just the way this lineup is shaken out, like even if Pham and Will Myers and a couple of these guys kind of go down because they have in the past, like I don't know if that necessarily means that Kim is going to get the lion's share of at-bats, and even if he does, if he's going to be successful. So there's a lot more risk than reward for me right now.
I tend to agree with both of you in different ways. So here we go. I like Ha-Seong Kim. I like Ha-Seong Kim a lot. I got to watch him a good amount when I was watching KBO baseball last spring because I was bored and I wanted to play DFS.
Who knew that would finally pay off?
Yeah, right. I was like, well, it's baseball, right? I guess. I don't know how well the power is necessarily going to translate, but the speed will. And we've already seen he can take a walk. The contact, I think, will come. I think he's just got to kind of get used to major league pitching. He's not used to seeing a bunch of guys be able to throw 100 and throw really, really effective sliders. So I think it will come. I don't know how quickly it's going to come. And so while I think at some point this season he is going to be playing every day in San Diego, it may not be to start the season. And he may actually get sent down like Warner was just talking about to start the season. And so I would be hesitant to draft him in like NFBC leagues where it's really difficult to stash people, except for draft and holds. Draft and holds, I definitely would. I'd love to take him, especially where he's going. But if you don't have really deep benches, he may be a difficult guy to hold on to. But he'll be someone like that I put on my watch list. And the moment he gets called up, I'm in. I'm going to be back in on him. I have him in a few leagues already. Most of them are draft and hold, so I'm okay with what I paid. But like when the main events come around for me here in a few weeks, I probably not going to take him there just because if he doesn't make the opening day roster, I just can't hold on to that, not knowing when he'll be back. I do think he's going to be good at some point. I do think that he's going to hit for average. I think he's going to have a really strong on-base percentage, and I think he's going to steal a ton of bases. I think he definitely has like 30 stolen base upside in a full season, and I don't think he's popless. I don't know how well the pop translates. He was a guy who was like 25, 30 in Korea, but they've had like bouncy balls too. And we've seen guys. Bouncy. We've seen guys come from the KBO, like Byung-Young, was it Byung-Young Park?
Oh God, don't bring him up. That was awful.
Who like hit 50 bombs in Korea and then couldn't hit, 10 here. So I think that like let's not overrate what he did power-wise in Korea, but the speed is definitely there. The on-base percentage is there. He's got a good eye. He's already walked, I think, 4 or 5 times here in spring training. He's just kind of got to get used to major league pitching, and I think he'll be all right. All right, let's move on over and talk about another set of guys, because we have Gavin Lux and Edwin Rios, both kind of on the outside looking in. It sounds like the Dodgers are a little bit more committed to playing Lux a fair amount early in the season, which is a bit surprising considering he had 1 postseason plate appearance. So when the games really mattered to them, they were not putting him in the game. Yet their manager has said, like, they think he's a guy who can hit against righties and lefties and should get some playing time. So, Warner, what are your thoughts on both Edwin Rios and Gavin Lux for the 2021 season?
Yeah, so I like them both for different reasons. Lux obviously has a pretty nice, minor league pedigree and track record. I don't think we've seen nearly the best in a very short amount of time in the major leagues, like 140 at-bats total. But I agree with the Dodgers. I think that he should play the lion's share, at second base and maybe get 80 to 90% of the plate appearances. He's not bad defensively. I think that his showing in the major leagues in terms of batting average has been well below what I expect for him. I think he's like a 280-ish hitter long term. And, so far in a very limited sample, he hasn't been able to show that. I think that there's probably 20 to 25 home runs in there. I think that there's double-digit steals potentially. Probably best to, like right now I have him projected for 4 for the season. But, I could see double digits potentially as well. The Dodgers have a great lineup. Like, there's a lot to like with Lux, and he's going at a pretty solid cost at $240. The one downside is that he's probably going to hit lower in the lineup, and his role isn't defined. So, you can take that for what it's worth. But I like Lux a lot this year. I also really like Edwin Rios. I liked him more before, we established roles for like Justin Turner and, the roster was kind of set. But like if Rios, as we saw at a very limited time in 2020, if Rios gets to play, he has like mammoth power, like game-changing power, like fantasy-changing power if he's able to get on the field. And I like to take those guys in deeper formats and just have them on my bench, even if they're only going to play a couple days a week. If somebody like Rios falls into a situation where he does get a fair amount of playing time, like say something happens to Muncy or Bellinger, goes down or whatever it is, like somebody like Rios can really help you out for a significant amount of time, depending on how things go. So I like both of them for different reasons. Rios is obviously free right now in drafts, but I believe in his power. His skills are great. He was one of my, top sleepers or quote unquote sleepers. There are no sleepers anymore, but he was one of the guys that I really was targeting in the offseason. And unfortunately things kind of played out with the roster where he wasn't going to get a, defined role, but Rios is legit. And if he's able to get into some playing time, or, in my opinion, I want him to get traded. So that way the Dodgers can have, another arm that's going to make them the best pitching unit in the universe. But I really genuinely think that Rios and Lux present a ton of value. If I had to lean one, it's Rios because he's free. But in like 12-team mixers, I wouldn't hate having Lux as my starting second baseman just to see how it goes. It could potentially kind of bite you over the first couple months, but I do think we see the beginning of things changing for Lux where we, finally see some of the minor league success translate.
All right, Govier, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's my turn to talk now, and the things I have to say with my mouth are this. I think he is great, and the other guy is great. End of story. What else can he say? Lux had a bogus 2020. Forget it. Just throw it away. Throw it in the dumpster. And Mike he just said everything I want to say about Edwin Rios. I wrote a song about Edwin Rios. I love him that much. It's so good.
Send it to me.
He is so good. Oh, I will. It's on YouTube. I'll send you a link. It's a Duran Duran cover. It's really dumb, but it's great. It's all about Edwin Rios and how amazing he is.
I've never been more in for anything in my life.
Deal, brother. Let me tell you this. Everything Mike said about it is true. Edwin Rios is a power bat. He is.
You're about
power
to say elite.
incarnate.
You can say elite. It's fine.
He is. He is an elite power bat, and I'm so pissed. I wrote the song the night before Justin Turner signed back with him, and it ruined everything because I specifically mentioned that Justin Turner was no longer in town, and now it was party time for Edwin Rios. Now I have no shares of him because I couldn't take the risk of him not playing enough, and I love him. Yeah. You know how much it pains me to pass him by every time I draft, but I have to because it's a mess over there. As far as Gavin Lux is concerned, I think he's going to be rocking and rolling. If you're telling me Chris Taylor is going to be preventing him from breaking out, I'm not buying that. I will take Gavin Lux. I would take a lot more shares of Lux than Rios, unfortunately, even though I like Rios more as a player.
Yeah, I think you guys absolutely nailed it. I mean, I liked Edwin Rios as kind of a sleeper guy coming into draft season, but Justin Turner there has kind of ruined it. That being said, Justin Turner gets hurt, right? Like Justin Turner's, value in himself because people get scared away by the injury profile. But there's a reason people get scared away by the injury profile because he doesn't really get to 500 plate appearances very often because he has a hard time staying on the field. And I think he's 34, something like that. So like
going on 36.
All right, 35.
He's 35,
yeah. So I mean, like, we're not talking about a guy who's young and injury prone. We're talking about a guy who's getting older and injury prone. So I think Edwin Rios is going to be a hot pickup at some point. I don't necessarily want to draft him anywhere, but I think he's a guy that I definitely want to kind of keep, on my watch list, waiting for that Justin Turner injury. Or if the DH does get snuck in, he would become really, really valuable because I think he would be on his way to 500 plus plate appearances. Gavin Lux, I mean, I think Warner nailed it, right? What does the fantasy industry always do? They overhype prospects, and then the moment a prospect disappoints us, we like rewrite them off. We're like, I'm done with him. Like, this guy is a former like top 5 prospect for fantasy a season ago. And now because he had like some really shitty, a first cup of coffee, we're just going to give up on the dude. No, dude still has power, still has speed, in one of the best lineups in baseball. And he's going to play. They said he's going to play. So, it may not be every day because they're going to get Chris Taylor in there too. But they've got a lot of guys on this team with injury histories, right? We're just talking about Justin Turner. We haven't even talked about AJ Pollock and his injury profile. Cody Bellinger is coming off of an injury. They're going to be passed to playing time to move Chris Taylor off of second and give Gavin Lux full-time plate appearances. Gavin Lux is going way, way too late. And in spite of the fact that he's a Dodger, absolutely love him.
And Turner will be 37 in November.
Okay,
37.
all right.
So he's well on his way to being an old man. But they also mess with their lineups. I think it's underrated a bit. The Dodgers mess with their lineups like the Rays do sometimes, but they don't get as dinged for it because they make more money or they spend more money. I don't know. It's very strange.
Well, it's because their lineup is just filled with fucking superstars. That's why.
Yeah, I guess that's true too.
That helps. Yeah, that helps.
If you asked an average baseball fan if they could name 4 Rays offensive players, I bet that most couldn't.
All right, we're going to finish out this episode with Avisail Garcia. The signing of Jackie Bradley Jr. moves him kind of to the bench. Now, right now, Lorenzo Cain's dealing with a quad issue, so there might be a path to playing time early in the season, but that could disappear once Cain is ready to go. So, Govier, what are your thoughts on Avisail Garcia?
Another former Tiger. I'm very familiar with Baby Miggy. They used to call him the next Miguel Cabrera when he was up and coming here. And that certainly did not come to fruition. Maybe it was a little of extreme moniker. But in the end, he's just a guy that I think is solid. He's solid. He's fine. He's not somebody I'm dying to get in my drafts. He's not someone I'm like, I got to get him in. I got to have Avisail Garcia or else my season will be ruined. No. It's not like that. The signing of JBJ makes things very cloudy, confuses me greatly. I don't know what that says about him so much as what it probably says about Locaine. Like, the party could be over for Locaine. So I actually think playing time is in play, quite much so for Mr. Garcia, because they have, Yelich is a stellar. He'll be there all day. And then it's JBJ, and then I think it's him. And it's a matter of, will Locaine be healthy enough, or does he still have the desire to play? Because he sat out last year, but he's back now because he's contractually obligated. He could retire if he wants to. He's not hit. He doesn't provide me a spark. So I think that actually means if you like this lineup, if you love Miller Park, like most people do, it's a hitter's fest, then Avisail Garcia could be a nice bit of a value play for you in your drafts. I know he stings the ball sometimes, but then other times his StatCast numbers actually show that he crushes the ball. Like, oh, wow, like his exit velocity, hard hit, all that jazz. It's pretty weak, at least from last year's numbers. He's also quicker than you think. So, I don't know. I avoid him. I don't really have a lot to say other than that. I'm not a big fan. He's 29 years old. We've already kind of seen who he is. Unless he shows some type of leap this year, then you guys can go ahead and draft him, and I'll feel so loaded with tens of thousands of other players that I could take that I won't really worry about it if I don't have him.
All right, Warner, where are you on Garcia?
Yeah, I think so. The Brewers, I'm like trying to think of their thought process here, and they probably feel, I agree with Mike, that they probably don't feel confident in Lorenzo Cain, which is probably the reason that they signed JBJ. But between Garcia, who has a extensive injury history, and then somebody like Lorenzo Cain, who also has issues, I feel like they probably think between the two that they'll be able to get a nice full-time defensive and slightly offensive player out of that. Garcia, like Mike also kind of mentioned there, like he put up 87 and 85th percentile barrel rates for 2 straight years prior to last season. He's also is like upper tier in sprint speed. Doesn't necessarily translate to stolen bases. He only has 1 double-digit stolen base year throughout his whole entire career, but not a bad defender. Somebody that has hit, 18, 19, 20 home runs between 2017 and 2019, and that's with injuries baked in there. Somebody that also steals a few bases, not the best from a batting average standpoint, but, for his career, is somebody in the 260s. His expected batting average for his career is in the 250 to 260 range as well. In a good year, he might be able to get you 270 to 280. If he's in a good year this season, then, maybe that comes to fruition. I'm projecting somewhere in the like 18 to 20 home run range with a few stolen bases. I know Milwaukee didn't really attempt many steals last year, but I think in 2019 they were in the top 7. I think we potentially see him get busy on the base paths a little bit. The Milwaukee team as a whole, I think, starts to run a little bit more. So overall, I like Garcia for where he's going. I agree that he's not a sexy name. I think he's somebody that's going to drop. I mean, his max selection is like 460. Right now, he's going like on average 330. So like somebody that if you draft him, nobody's gonna be like, oh damn it, I wish I got Garcia. But like he's somebody that can definitely help you, especially in deeper formats, especially in NL only as well. And again, we don't really know what like Lorenzo Cain is doing right now. Like we don't know how good he's going to be when he comes back. Like I just think that there's a lot of questions with him, and Garcia has been relatively healthy. He's been hitting leadoff and in the heart of the order in Milwaukee throughout spring as well. Like there's a lot of pros for Garcia going into this year.
I mean, here's the thing with Garcia. Well, and here's the thing with the Brewers just in general. What they did with their signings this offseason was prioritize defense, right? They bring in Colton Wong to kind of solidify that defense up the middle. They bring in Jackie Bradley Jr. to solidify that defense in the outfield. And so that's why Garcia is on the outside looking in. But like I mentioned at the top, Lorenzo Cain dealing with an injury right now, so they can move Bradley Jr. over to center, keep Garcia in right. I think he's an early season kind of decent gamble because we just don't know how quickly a 37-year-old Lorenzo Cain is going to come back from this.
Be 35 next month.
35. So we don't know how quickly he's going to come back from this injury and what he's necessarily going to give us after a year off. So I think he's worth a gamble, especially in shallower formats where there is a good replacement level available on the waiver wire. So that way, if Lorenzo Cain does come in, completely kick Garcia out of the lineup, then you can go get the next guy off of the waiver wire, go pick up whoever's hot and drop Garcia. I kind of throw out 2020 for Avisail Garcia, and I know Govier mentioned Statcast data really kind of tailed off last year. It's because he came in from kind of that layoff out of shape, and he even said he goes, all I did was sit at home and eat. So and he's a big boy too, 6'4", 250. I think people miss that about him. And he's come into camp in really, really good shape this year. Really committed to losing some weight in the offseason. I don't love the best shape of your life kind of narratives, but that being said, when a guy says last year, we had this layoff and I just sat around and ate and it really affected me, and now I've recommitted myself. We know he's been able to be a pretty decent hitter in his time in the major leagues. I think he gets often overlooked because of those baby Miggy comps and what people thought he would do from his prospect pedigree. But I think he's a solid hitter. And I think as your last outfielder in a 12-team league, you kind of ride it to begin the season, and maybe you can continue it through the entire season, or maybe you end up dropping him once Cain comes back, sometime in April. But you might get a few weeks or maybe even a month worth of production, and then you move on to the next guy. All right. That is going to do it for this episode. Govier, thank you for joining us.
I loved it. I'll come back on any time and talk shop with you guys. Mike Warner is a classic guy. Mike is a smart guy. He doesn't take no shit either. So thanks for having me on the show. Justin, I love you. We're friends. I've really enjoyed this opportunity. I'm Michael Govier at Twitter. MJ Govier, GOV is in Victor IER. Of course, the hosting of the show, Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's, Palazzo Podcast on Twitter. Follow us. We have a Facebook page too. You can see all of our shows live or replayed later on our YouTube link, which is available in our Twitter bio. And of course, you can find us on every podcast platform available. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Of course. Evil Mike, remind everybody where you can reach and plug anything you got going on.
At Mike Werner, FWFB, not at Evil Mike, FWFB. And check out a lot of stuff on baseballhq.com, Friends with Fantasy Benefits podcast, maybe some other stuff. But excited for the year to actually get started. And hopefully we get a full 6 months. Hopefully we get a DH. And I'm pretty excited.
I'm just checking for you right now, Mike, to see if at Evil Mike is available.
I hope not. I genuinely hope not.
It's not available. Sorry,
Seems
buddy.
doubtful.
I figured it wouldn't. Yeah, I figured it wouldn't.
You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. You can still get the Friends of Fantasy Benefits draft guide. You can get the $7 PDF by emailing me at justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com. Or you can go over to Amazon and buy it there. The Fantasy Benefit is what it is called, and it's available in paperback or ebook over on Amazon. I write daily at Fangraphs. I'm going to be writing a Fantasy Alarm as soon as the season starts this year. Run at Friends of Fantasy Benefits and TGFBI.com. And then I'm on this podcast, obviously, the Sleeper on the Bus podcast and the TGFBI podcast. So that will do it for this episode. For Mike and Mike, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us. Have a fantastic baseball season.